people were carefully picked. There wasn't a single Kennedy liberal on that commission. Now, that's a little unusual because Lyndon Johnson picked the people. It was loaded with Republicans, okay? So that's not totally determining, but it's a fact. It's a fact. The other thing is Lyndon Johnson buttonholed them. He said, we want to go ahead. I want you, Warren. Warren did not want to be on the. The history of this thing. Warren refused to be on the commission. Senator Russell refused to be on the commission for reasons that I have time to go into. Lyndon Johnson simply said to them, "I'll have some information for you." And what he used here, and he talks about it, you see it, that if we don't handle this thing correctly, 40 million Americans are going to die. Now, what could that mean? He suspected what? That that was a conspiracy involving initially the Soviet Union, okay? Because they have nuclear weapons. And if they had anything to do with the assassination of Kennedy, we were going to then ultimately have to take a stand, or if their client, Castro, had something to do with it, we're going to have to go in and take out Castro's Cuba. They had a military alliance with the Soviets. What are they going to do? Well, they're not going to come in and save Cuba, but they might move in and take over West Berlin. If they did that, the military, regardless of what the president would have said, the military would have said, that's it. We have to move. We have a nuclear arsenal that's overwhelming, could overwhelm the Soviets, all of Central Europe, would take out the Chinese and everything else in the meantime. So when Lyndon pulled that on them, on both Russell and on Warren, about 40 million Americans dying, and telling them, there's Oswald, Mexico, he was in contact with the Cuban consulate, the Soviet consulate, talked to a Soviet agent at the Soviet embassy, Kostikov, who was the CIA said was a wet expert, assassination expert in the Western Hemisphere. What the hell is he doing talking to Lee Harvey Oswald? Where's all this going to go? All that's crap. But in terms of the 22nd, nobody, Lyndon Johnson didn't know what happened to the president of the time he was killed. Hoover didn't know what happened. Katzenbach didn't know what happened. But they wanted to get on, and they needed to move ahead. Johnson particularly wanted, and I think this is very important, in addition to all this other possibility of a very dark day in the world if Kennedy was a victim of an international communist conspiracy, Johnson didn't want to touch that. He had his Great Society program. He didn't want to what? First act of his administration is to send the balloon up. We're at nuclear war. No, thank you. Who the hell needs that job? And the other thing is Lyndon Johnson, understandably, needed and wanted a clear bill of health to the presidency. He had to have an explanation that got him out of this, this Macbeth theme. Kennedy went to Dallas. That's Johnson country. Johnson could never have been president in the 60s, being a Southerner back then. Those were different times. And all of a sudden, what now? And he knew that Kennedy was going to drop him from the ticket in '64. He was going to pick somebody else up. He knew that. So it all points to the fact of, the only way he was ever going to grab the ring was through assassination. Now, I am not suggesting, nor do I believe he had anything to do with it. But there were those who said, what role did Lyndon have to play in this? There was that terrible, depending on what your politics were, that play called McBird. I don't know if it's well beyond your time, but that's what it was. McBird being a contemporary Macbeth scene. Okay, that was it. So anyway, so that was the situation, to give him a clean entree into the presidency, and therefore he needed a politically safe explanation. No conspiracy, either right or left, no domestic, no foreign, just a lone nut act. Hoover said wonderful, because you see Hoover was our top G-man, and more important than any president, Hoover was an institution in his own right, okay? He had been in that position since the 20s. This is now 40-some years as head of the FBI. He was a cosmic hero, #1 man, G-man. Now, if there was a conspiracy, the feeling among a lot of Americans who had read FBI propaganda, and the FBI had a terrific propaganda machine, is that how come Hoover missed it? He's supposed to take care of things like that. To protect us against domestic insurgency, foreign plotting, he should have been on top of this case. And I could talk a little bit about that. The FBI made a terrible blunder here. But if it was an act of a lone nut assassin, even the vaunted FBI cannot protect a president against an individual nutcase. I mean, how many are there running around this country in terms of made threats? Hundreds of thousands. I mean, you can't lock up 50% of the state of Texas when the president comes to that state. I mean, so it benefited him. And of course, Hoover knew too, if he did Johnson's bidding, he was now 69. He had one more year before he would be forced to retire, and that's to give up the only thing that mattered to him. That was head of the FBI. If he did Johnson's bidding, Lyndon would keep him on, and Lyndon does keep him on a year-by-year basis. That's how he controlled him. Hoover would now be on for every year. His appointment would have to be renewed, and the president would have to renew it. So this was all worked out. This was all decided over the weekend of the assassination. And what clears the way totally for this to happen is Oswald's own assassination. Once Oswald is dead, there'll be no trial. The evidence will not be tested. You can say anything and do any damn thing you want to. There's not going to be any serious cross-examination, because Oswald has no lawyer. There's nobody interested in protecting his rights. And so you go ahead, and it made for a nice cleaning up situation. You go ahead and run a prosecution case against the dead man. Okay? Case closed.